Good morning, family. Welcome to those of you all who are new to the platform, and welcome back to those of you all who are familiar with who I am and what I represent. My name is Marcus, and I am the individual behind the content that you see on the King Genie platform. We never really know what difficulties a person is facing, and I think as men, it's our responsibility to make sure that our brothers are doing well. And so, this next episode that you're going to be seeing, it deals with a father and a son. And the father notices that the son is beginning to isolate himself. So let's see how the father helps his son to reach a more stable and a more reasonable standpoint in his life. Please enjoy. Peace.
The more you think about yourself, the more miserable you are. We're so social that you can take the most antisocial human beings imaginable, so psychopathic criminals, and you can punish them by putting them in solitary confinement. That's how social human beings are. And so your mental health is way more dependent on your nesting within a social structure than on your, say, the internal coherence of your belief systems. It's more like, does anyone like you? Do you have any friends? Do you have anyone that loves you?
There is a difference between being alone and choosing to live isolated. Every man needs moments by himself. A quiet room, a long drive, a walk where nobody is talking. Time to think, time to pray, time to recover. Solitude can restore a man, but isolation is different. Isolation convinces a man that he doesn't need anyone. It teaches him to keep everything inside, to solve every problem alone, to hide disappointment, to hide fear, to hide pain. And eventually, the man who once wanted some privacy can become a man who has cut himself off from the very people who could help him grow. A father understands something his son may not yet understand. A man can become so comfortable being alone that he begins rejecting the wisdom, correction, and perspective that only relationships can provide. The lesson isn't that a man should never be alone. The lesson is that a man should never become so isolated that he can no longer receive wisdom, encouragement, correction, or perspective from others. Today, a father sits down with his son to explain why having good people around you isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's protection.
The son had been quiet for several weeks. His father noticed, not because the young man was doing anything obviously wrong. He was still working, still paying his bills, still taking care of his responsibilities. But something had changed. He stopped calling his friends. He stopped coming around the family. He stopped talking about what was happening in his life. When people asked how he was doing, his answer was always the same: "I'm good." But he wasn't. One evening, his father found him sitting alone in the garage. The lights were off. The only illumination came from the small lamp above the workbench. His father walked in and sat beside him. Neither man spoke for a while. Finally, the father asked, "What's going on?" The son shrugged. "Nothing." The father smiled gently. "Son, you've been saying nothing for 3 weeks." The son looked down. "I just don't feel like being around people." "Why?" "I don't want anybody asking questions." "About what?" The son hesitated. "Everything. My job, my money, my relationships, what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. I don't have answers, and I'm tired of people telling me what I should do." The father nodded. "I understand." Then he said something the son wasn't expecting. "Sometimes a man needs to get away from the noise. But don't confuse getting away from the noise with cutting yourself off from wisdom."
There will be seasons when you need solitude. Take them. Think. Reflect. Get yourself together. But don't build a permanent home in isolation. You need people. Not everybody, but somebody. You need men who know you well enough to recognize when you're not yourself. You need people who can tell you the truth when you're wrong. You need people who can remind you of your strength when you forget it. And sometimes you need someone who will simply sit beside you while you figure things out. Isolation can make a man believe that asking for help means he has failed. It doesn't. Sometimes asking for help is evidence that you understand the value of wisdom. Think about it. If you were building a house, would you refuse every measurement because you believed you should figure everything out yourself? If you were lost on a road you've never traveled, would you throw away the map because you were supposed to be a strong man? No. Then don't do it with your life. The father looked at his son. Son, do you know what happens when you allow trustworthy people into your life? You get perspective. When you're alone with a problem long enough, your thoughts become an echo chamber. Fear gets louder. Disappointment gets heavier. Anger starts sounding reasonable. And sometimes a temporary problem begins to look like a permanent reality. But when you have someone wise enough to listen, they can help you see what you couldn't see by yourself. The father leaned forward. When a man isolates himself, he doesn't just lose company. He can lose perspective. He can lose accountability. He can lose encouragement. He can lose opportunities to learn from someone else's experience. And sometimes he can lose the opportunity for somebody to notice that he's struggling before the struggle becomes a crisis. The son listened quietly. The father continued, "That's why you have to be careful. Isolation doesn't always feel dangerous. Sometimes it feels comfortable. No one challenges you. No one disagrees with you. No one asks uncomfortable questions. But comfort isn't always peace. Sometimes comfort is simply the absence of accountability." Inner work. Learning the difference between solitude and isolation. The father looked at his son. Before you decide that you don't need anybody, you need to be honest about why you're pulling away. Sometimes you need solitude because you're tired. Sometimes you need space because you've been hurt. Sometimes you need time to think because life has become noisy. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes a man isolates himself because he doesn't want to be challenged. Sometimes he doesn't want anyone to see that he's struggling. Sometimes he doesn't want to admit that he made a mistake. And sometimes he would rather be alone than risk being disappointed by someone again. The son remained quiet. The father continued, "That's where the real work begins." Ask yourself, am I seeking solitude or am I avoiding people? Being alone can restore you. Avoiding people can keep you stuck. Am I protecting my peace or protecting my pride? There is wisdom in keeping certain things private, but pride can convince you that asking for help is beneath you. Who has earned the right to speak truth into my life? You don't need everyone's opinion, but you should have someone whose wisdom you respect enough to listen when they tell you something you don't want to hear. What happens inside me when someone challenges me? Do you become defensive? Do you shut down? Do you walk away? Or can you listen long enough to determine if there is something you need to learn? What am I carrying that I was never meant to carry alone? A problem doesn't become strength simply because you refuse to talk about it. Sometimes strength is recognizing when something needs another set of eyes, another perspective, or another voice. A man should be able to stand alone, but he shouldn't have to live alone. There is strength in independence. There is wisdom in community. There is courage in admitting that you don't have every answer. And there is tremendous value in having someone who knows your character well enough to tell you the truth. The practical benefit of avoiding isolation is simple. You gain perspective before emotion becomes your decision maker. You gain accountability before your excuses become habits. You gain encouragement before disappointment becomes hopelessness. You gain wisdom from people who have already survived what you're experiencing. And you give other people the opportunity to love you, support you, and walk beside you. The father looked at his son. Son, you were never designed to carry every burden by yourself. Be independent enough to stand. Be humble enough to listen. Be wise enough to know the difference. Life will give you moments when you need to step away from the crowd. That's okay. Just don't step so far away that you can't hear wisdom when it calls your name. A strong man can stand alone, but a wise man knows he doesn't have to. Don't let isolation convince you that needing good people makes you weak. The right people don't weaken a man's strength. They help him use it wisely.
Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Peace.